That's how we've always done it. In times of stability and success, this attitude can be very effective. There's no need to change what's working, right? No reason to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But in these most uncertain times, what learning and assessment looks like for students will need to take a shift in mindset to move our student achievement forward. So, can I be real a second? For just a millisecond? As we create authentic learning experiences for students in digital learning environments. So what is authentic learning? Authentic learning describes learning activities that are either carried out in real-world context or have high-level transfer to a real-world setting. Authentic learning activities should have both personal and cultural relevance to students. The more relevant material and activities are for students, the more engaged they become to the learning process that you've laid out in front of them. So, is what you're doing real or is it fake? Is it relevant outside of the classroom? Would outside experts consider this work to be acceptable in their field? Think about it this way. Would a student have a conversation about their work outside of being asked, "What did you learn from school today?" We know that the educational system limits a teacher's autonomy to create 100% authentic assessments every single day. But the closer we can get to that number, the more engagement we will see from our students. And it can happen in small ways. For example, listen to this prompt from an elementary classroom. You have 1,400 square feet of boards to use for a new treehouse. Design a treehouse that has a volume of at least 250 cubic feet. Include sketches of your treehouse. Are your dimensions reasonable? Explain your reasoning. Now, at first glance, that's a great prompt. It seems like it's pretty engaging. What student wouldn't like to have a treehouse built and design their own? That's great. They can throw in stickers. It'll be wonderful. But we can take it a step further and we can make it even more relevant. So let's reframe it and look at it this way. You are a treehouse designer and your neighbor would like you to design a treehouse for her children. Your neighbor wants a draft with sketches and a 3D prototype of your treehouse before it is built so that she can better envision the treehouse. This also allows you to make necessary changes without having to start again from scratch and waste building materials. Your neighbor is on a budget and already has purchased the lumber, which consists of 1,400 square feet of boards. Due to the furniture that she plans to use, the neighbor wants at least a volume of 250 cubic feet. Since the neighbor's budget is pretty tight, a proposal that includes calculations and 3D modeling sketches is necessary since she has also contacted a competing treehouse designer and wants to go with the best proposal. Using a persuasive presentation, a proposal supported by mathematical concepts and reasoning, and a prototype, can you convince your neighbor to go with your proposal? So, you notice there are a few shifts in that example. It's the same concept, it's the same idea, but we're looking at it through a more authentic lens, a lens that perhaps adds an extra element, an extra context for students to connect with the work that you want them to accomplish. Now, part of what we're doing here is trying to emulate what the pros do. It is important for all the work to be meaningful. They should engage in the actual practices and processes that people in that discipline use. Think about historians, scientists. In this case, we're going to take a look at a couple of example professionals here. One looks a little bit more professional than the other, but let's start with Michael Jordan. When Michael Jordan practiced basketball, did the drills he worked on help him get better? Were they relevant to his goal of being the best basketball player on the planet? When some of our students practice basketball, do the drills look similar? Does it relate to the same field of work? When you think of it in that context, the work that we provide students doesn't have to be exactly what the pros do, but it can emulate and look very close to the work that they do. Now, when we watch Chip and Joanna on Fixer Upper, there are some lighter moments, as seen in the image above, but there are also times when they have to build, measure, communicate, and hammer a few nails. We may not ask our students to rebuild an old home, but we can create work with a different frame of reference and context to connect the work to the real world. It's also important to use what the pros use. Tools matter. Air Jordans, shiplap, they matter. Now, don't overwhelm students with tools that are outside of their usage or beyond their scope. But at the same time, don't hold them back. They're here to learn. And they can learn new tools, new platforms, new ways to get the job done. And that is how we can move them forward, especially if they feel like they have an invested voice in moving the learning forward. It just adds to the authenticity. And that's what we're looking to build here. Now, there's real research, inquiry, and literacy strategies in every profession. Take a statistician, for example. I've looked up a job description for a statistician and just listened to some of the options and activities that they have here for the statistician and what they're looking for. They want someone who can identify relationships and trends in data, determine whether statistical methods are appropriate, prepare data for processing by organizing information, checking for inaccuracies, and adjusting and weighing the raw data. Present statistical and non-statistical results using charts, bullets, and graphs in meetings or conferences to audiences such as clients, peers, and students. Design research projects that apply valid scientific techniques. Now, when you hear that list of in their job description for a statistician, you hear a bunch of things that sound really relevant or are activities that we teach in school. Build and create charts, bullets, and graphs. Use statistical methods and determine whether they're appropriate. Identify trends in data. Sounds like a math class to me, but it's important to think about the work that students are doing and frame it in a more authentic way. Again, looking at another teaching example and a way of rebuilding a lesson, let's look at this activity from a high school. In physical science, 9th grade students are using a teacher-provided Google Doc to fill in the blanks while they listen to a teacher share information about sedimentary rock using an interactive multimedia Prezi slide deck that the teacher created. Students then submit their copy of the document back to the teacher using Google Classroom so that she can assess note-taking accuracy and whether students were paying attention. Now, on the surface, it seems a bit dull, but it does get the job done. They are checking for engagement to making sure that they are paying attention and following along, and they will get the content that's in the lesson. But is there a better way to do it? A more authentic way to do it? How about this? How about turning some of those learning objectives into how and why questions? How do the structures and processes of the Earth system change the Earth and its surface? Why do processes such as plate tectonics and natural disasters change the Earth and its surface? After doing your initial research, use some of the following questions to redefine or refine your research and determine who would benefit from your findings and whether you should take an informative or persuasive approach. What are the implications for cities, seaports, and countries when these structures and processes change the Earth and its surface? What examples, past and present, are there of these events? What should we start or stop doing and why? Who needs to be informed or persuaded about these issues? Create a presentation with the proper tools and format to deliver your information to an authentic audience. Now, if you think about it from that perspective, it went from a note-taking activity to this full-blown research assignment. And I know that that requires time, which gets us to our next point. How do we assess this? How are we creating real-world products or performances for authentic audiences? So when we think about that last example of taking a note, fill-in-the-blank activity and turning it into this big research project, it seems disproportionate in terms of class time and in terms of think time, and maybe in terms of resources beyond the classroom. But when we think about what we want to truly assess and how we truly want students to apply the knowledge, this is a much better approach, especially in terms of developing student engagement to build better products and projects that get to the relevance of the standards that we are teaching. And the closer that we can get to that, and the closer that we can make that pair align, the more engaging and the higher the achievement students will reach. Now, let's make it digital. We know that this is not a natural format for many teachers, but we know that digital technologies can be used in authentic ways to facilitate the assessment process. We need to make sure that we are encouraging our students to share their work in a virtual environment the way that the pros would. Is that through a quick Zoom screen share? Is that through developing a website that's public and open for classmates to see? Just make sure it makes sense. Understand that this may take some time, and chunk it with deadlines. The great part about this is that the real world combines a bunch of different activities and a bunch of different content from all the areas. When we read the job descriptions of a statistician, we know that there are definitely some literacy activities that were built into the job description. Clearly, math was a big element. Depending on what the data is about, it could be very relevant to social studies or science. And so in that way, we know that we can build together a way to incorporate lots of different content and to create these cross-curricular activities and projects and assignments that are authentic and real, because that's how the real world works. Math and science and social studies aren't in silos that we only engage with during one part of the day and not in the other. And that is how we can make it digital and relevant, by combining these in our short period of time together. Again, keep standards high. Make sure that students fully understand and reach the learning goals that you have set for them. Provide reflective feedback along the way to make sure that they are able to reach that. But we can make it digital and we can make it work. Now, I know this is brand new information. Perfection isn't expected. But by working collaboratively within your teams, you can find ways to make the learning experiences for your students more authentic and more real. Thanks.